So, from the industry's point of view, pesticides are not only essential, they are safe. But they can't just sell their pesticides to farmers. The risks of using them has to be calculated. This is the job of the government's advisory committee on pesticides. We went to see them. Professor David Coggan heads the committee.
The responsibility for advising government on whether a pesticide should be used in this country comes down to our committee.
So, could I welcome everybody to the 299th meeting of the Advisory Committee on Pesticides.
Perhaps we should make clear at the outset that you can never say that anything in life is completely safe. I don't know if you've discussed that with other people before. Nothing in life can we guarantee is absolutely safe. So it's about whether things are acceptably safe, whether we're sufficiently confident that they will be safe.
But we actually don't have any control over pesticide use, so isn't that why there's so much suspicion about it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. That's why people in general are much less happy with risks that are imposed on them from outside, aren't they, over which they don't have personal control. So people will smoke cigarettes and expose themselves to massive risks in comparison with what they will tolerate, say, from air pollution or from water pollution.
But they choose to smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of our human nature, part of our human psychology, that one of the things about whether a risk is acceptable is whether we have individual control over it. The risks that are permitted in pesticide regulation are absolutely tiny compared with the sorts of risks that people take on for themselves when they choose to drive without a seatbelt or smoke cigarettes or go rock climbing or something like that.
But, for example, organic farming, they don't use pesticides, so we don't have to take those risks.
Yeah, but they have to do other things instead then, don't they? They have to use alternative methods for controlling weeds, for example, so that may mean that they have to use their tractors more than a farmer who's applying pesticides. And there may be risks associated with using agricultural machinery. There are more.
But it's not just the risks to the farmers, though, is it? It's the risks to the people that are consuming the pesticides and pesticides residues on food and stuff like that. So it's not just the farmers, is it?
Yes. No, and that's why the potential risks to consumers are an important part of the risk assessment that we carry out for pesticides.
We have a lighter agenda.
So there are risks that the committee considers, but as Professor Coggan was keen to point out, there are also benefits.
If you completely banned the use of pesticides in this country, then we would not be able to produce food at the same level that we do at the moment, the same quantities, or of the same quality, or of the same year-round availability. And the effect would be that prices of food would inevitably go up. And while that perhaps wouldn't be a problem for a lot of people, the sort of people who now can afford the extra prices to pay for organic food, it certainly would be a problem for some people in society. The poorer people in society would really find things quite difficult, I think.
The committee weigh up the risks and the benefits, but don't make the final decision.
I might feel that the level of risk associated with the presence of a pesticide residue in food is acceptable. You might feel that you don't agree with that, that even if we agree on what the level of risk is, I might feel it's acceptable, you might feel it's not acceptable. And deciding what level of risk is acceptable is not a scientific matter. That's a matter for everybody in society. And that's why it's important that ultimately the decisions that are made about pesticide regulation are made by ministers who are elected by the people. It is not the Advisory Committee on Pesticides ultimately that decides what is an acceptable risk for people to be exposed to.
Lord Whitty is the government minister responsible for pesticides.
Does the government actually want less pesticides to be used?
The government certainly wants to have a situation where pesticides have less harmful impact, and that probably means in most cases less use. But there's no point in having less use if it means you're using a more harmful pesticide. So we want the least harmful use of pesticides.
So the government actually accepts that pesticides are dangerous?
Well, most pesticides, not all, but most pesticides can, if if they're wrongly used, or if there is a significant intake, can harm human beings, and they may in certain circumstances also harm the environment. What the regulations and the policy is designed to do is to minimise that risk.